In this video, we're going to go ahead and focus on drawing key signatures. Now, key signatures are interesting in the fact that a lot of times I get a ton of questions about why exactly we use them or why we even have them. And really, for me, I think of it in a couple of different ways, and of course I can always be wrong. But there are some logical reasons. First of all, it allows you to not have to use as much ink writing out all of these different sharps and flats. It makes it a lot easier as well. The page doesn't become so crowded for us to read. That being said, one of the hard things is that you have to kind of remember which notes are sharp. And then the thing is the ordering also kind of makes it hard because it's not in alphabetical order. The reason why it's ordered this way, and so you'll see with the order of the sharps, is that this is the order in which they actually show up for the first time. So for example, in the key of C major of course has, 0 sharps, right? C major would end up being, and I'll use the smaller side of this, but C major would end up being C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then eventually, ending on C. However, when we're looking at something like G major, funny enough, G major is the first scale that actually has a sharp. So in G major it goes G, A, B, C, D, E, and then F sharp, and of course we eventually land back on G. So you'll notice that F sharp is this first sharp that shows up. Eventually, again, when we're looking at the key signature, that's exactly the first sharp that we end up drawing. So the first sharp that we end up drawing here is actually on the top line, and then we end up going through this kind of up and down type thing. This correlates specifically with what we call is the circle of fifths. For those of you who are unaware of what the circle of fifths is, I will probably do a video on this later on. If I'm being quite honest, I'm not the biggest fan of the circle of fifths because it's not really a circle. But the way that it works is that if you specifically start on C major and you're thinking about it more like a clock than anything, but let's say that C major is at 12 o'clock, 0 sharps, 0 flats. If you go up, so to the right, by fifths, you end up finding the next key that ends up adding a sharp to its scale. So for example, G major, as we said, that's the distance of a fifth, that has specifically 1 sharp, right? And that specific sharp that we end up having is an F sharp. Then of course you can end up moving on from there from G to D. D would then end up having 2 sharps, so on and so forth. It then goes to A, then E, then B, and so on. Now, in this video, we aren't going to necessarily talk about all of the tricks of how to identify the keys, but we're just going to go ahead and talk about how to draw the key signatures. So the ordering in which we go through is this order of F, C, G, D, A, E, B, all of these being sharps. Now, when we're talking about specifically the flats, the order of the flats, it's actually just those same letters but backwards. So for the flats, it's B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, C flat, and F flat. It's really, really nice how that ends up working. I will say that whenever we talk about the order of the flats, I personally, growing up, ended up remembering the order of the flats more so than I ended up remembering the order of the sharps. The reason why is because the first 4 letters of the flats spells an actual word, which is bead. And then in elementary school, for other, countries, primary school, in Japan, like shogakko, you end up having GCF, which is greatest common factor. Here in the United States, which is oftentimes a little bit easier. It's something that we deal with in math class. But again, so FCGDAEB or bead GCF. One of those two is easy to remember, and then you just have to practice kind of going backwards and forwards. But again, the way that this works is that really the sharp is more like a pound sign than it is a hashtag. And the reason why is because the 2 lines that are vertical are parallel and completely vertical, whereas the 2 lines that are technically horizontal are actually diagonal and parallel. So that's what we have. And then you have to make sure that whenever you're drawing these, that the whole inside of that sharp is being crossed through by, a line. If you're dealing with a line note, here we have C sharp, then G sharp, then D sharp, then we go down to A sharp. The reason why we go down at this point is because if we went up, we would be in the middle of kind of nowhere, and it would be hard to tell if it actually is an A sharp or not. Then we have specifically E sharp, and then we have B sharp. And as you notice, I started with the vertical ones first and then the diagonal ones second. It's really up to you how you end up doing it. Some kids really enjoy doing like tic-tac-toe and thinking of it that way instead. In terms of the flats, flats are just pointy Bs. So again, we have B flat, then E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, C flat, and then F flat. Much easier to draw the flats. The flats just go ahead and alternate going up, down, up, down, up, down. I've been asked before, why not start on like F sharp and then go C sharp and then, you know, G sharp and then D sharp, A sharp, E sharp, and B sharp? It's a very, very good question. Part of me thinks it has to do with continuity and the fact that both of these guys go down rather than having one go up and then another one go up as well. But other than that, I have no idea. A lot of this stuff of questioning why certain things end up working or why certain things are within music oftentimes can be boiled down to what ended up just becoming the most popular and what ended up sticking. For the bass clef, it's the same kind of shape or direction. So starting on F sharp, then going down, up, down, down, up, down, and then of course the flat's just going, you know, up and down alternating. So you can go ahead and of course pause the video and try this. But of course you can end up making your way through and going through and drawing again the sharps, and then you can trace in those flats. Now down here, what's really interesting is that you have an opportunity to go ahead and actually practice drawing the key signatures of all of these different scales. Now what I'm going to go ahead and do right now is that I'm going to go ahead and go very quickly over the tricks that are for sharps and flats. I won't go into nearly as much detail as I will go in when I do a video on identifying keys and key signatures. The way that we do this, especially with major scales, is quite simple. All you have to do for any time that you have a sharp scale, okay? So sharp scales specifically, all you have to do is that if you're given the major scale, so let's say like G major is a sharp scale, if you're given the major scale, all you have to do is you go down a half step, and it shows you what your newest sharp is. So in the case of G, if I go down a half step from G, well, if I go down any sort of step from G, it would be an F. But before we get to F, there's an F sharp. So the key signature for G major would look like this with just one F sharp. I could do the same thing with D major. So if I go from D, and again, I go down a half step, usually when I go down a step from D, it's, you know, to the letter C of some sort. But again, between C and D on the piano, there's a black key. That would be a C sharp. So in our order, what we would end up having is not only the C sharp, but we'd also have the F sharp. The way that it works in these scales is that they always accumulate sharps. So D major would have two sharps, F sharp and C sharp. Now what's really, really nice is the way that we've done this here is that I've actually put these in the order of the circle of fifths. So with every single one of these, you're going to be increasing by one sharp. But again, that rule still follows. Again, with A major, if I go from A and I go down a half step, I go down to G sharp. So G sharp again is the third one. So you would have F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. Again, you can go ahead and draw that in. But we would have F sharp, C sharp, G sharp. What you want to be very careful about is that as you get to this section where there's not a lot of space, you're going to need to draw these sharps pretty small and close together in order to be able to fit all of them. Okay, but with each of these, you're going to be increasing. So E major will have 4, then B will have 5, 6, and then 7. And again, if you're ever concerned about which sharps you have, just look at your order of sharps, right? If there's 1, it's going to have F sharp. If it's 2, you'll have F sharp, C sharp. If you have 3, F C G, F C G D, so on and so forth. Okay, so but that's kind of the way that this trick goes. So again, if you end up knowing what the scale is and you're trying to figure out the sharps, okay, or how many sharps we have, you have to go down a half step. So specifically, that's for when you know what the key is and are trying to find the sharps. Again, if you were trying to identify a key signature, it would be the opposite direction. So like, let's say that I had 3 sharps and I'm trying to identify it, right? I would have to go from the last sharp and I would have to do the opposite of this. Because again, I'm going the opposite direction. I'm going from the sharps to find the scale. So I would have to go up a half step. And the reason why we go up a half step in general is because Again, with every single key, the last step is that half step. So that's really what we're looking for, is that half step there at the end. And actually that half step tells you a lot, because it also tells you specifically whether or not a key is a sharp key versus a flat key. With every single one of these sharp keys, so all of these letters, if I go down a half step, I end up on a black key of some sort, at least for these guys. So for G, D, A, E, and B. I know that F sharp major and C sharp major are sharp keys because they have sharp in the name. Like, that's as simple as it gets. But like with these 5, you maybe won't know because again, they're just regular letters. So again, when I go from G though down a step, I get to a black key, an F sharp. Of course, if I'm going down a half step, it can't be a G flat because again, if you've seen the major scale video, you can't have 2 different kinds of G's in the same scale. For the flat keys, again, if I were to go ahead and compare, so like for example, people will oftentimes ask, well, how about F major? F major doesn't have a flat in the name. How do we know that it's a sharp or a flat key? F major is the only letter that, or the only flat major key that doesn't have flat in the name, which is really, really nice. All the rest of them, B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, and C flat, they actually have flats in the name, but F major doesn't have a flat in the name. And so when we're talking about F major, again, if you go down a half step from F major, between E and F, there is no black key. So F just goes straight down to E. And so for me, that's our indicator of just checking, oh, yes, F major is going to go ahead and have a flat rather than a sharp. That being said, again, pretty much all of the letters, like the unadulterated letters, the ones that haven't been changed with a sharp or a flat, specifically will be sharp keys. So G, D, A, E, B. The only exceptions of that rule will be F major, which is a flat key, and of course C major that has nothing in it. No sharps, no flats. Now, for the flat keys, it's the same premise. So I would just practice kind of drawing this order of flats, and that should end up doing the trick for you. So like for example, with F major, we would have B flat. With B flat major, we would have 2 flats. And again, I've gone through the circle of fifths for you. So this would be B flat, E flat, A flat, so on and so forth. Now, going back to the circle of fifths for a second, the way that it works, and this is why I say that it's not a circle, is that when you're going through this circle, you'll go through all the sharps, but you won't go all of a sudden through the flats. The reason why it's called a circle of fifths is that if you go specifically the opposite direction, so counterclockwise, if you go down by a fifth, you start to get the flat keys. The only issue with this is that the fifth, the distance of a fifth, it's always got to be a perfect fifth, as we would call it in music. And fifths are always based on whatever the lower note is. So as you're going down, right? So if I go down a fifth from F, you would think, okay, F, E, D, C, B. You would think that that's a fifth, but it's not. F to B is not necessarily a fifth that we're looking for. We're looking for a perfect fifth. In the key of B major, we have an F sharp, so that doesn't make sense. When we go down a perfect fifth from F, we're getting B flat. In the key of B flat major, F is the 5th note. Now, for a lot of people, this concept they absolutely hate, which is perfectly understandable. So we use a different approach instead. The pattern that you can end up finding with all of the flat keys, and I'll go ahead and draw them all out here, or at least some of them, you'll start to see a pattern in terms of where exactly do we see a note being added, or a flat being added. Okay, F, G, A, and then B flat. Then we go to E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C, D, E flat. Now I'm going to go ahead and of course show you the first 3 scales here that have flats, okay? So F has 1 flat, it's the 4th note of the scale, the 4th letter. Now, funny enough, the next scale that ends up adding a flat is B flat major, okay? We skipped a lot of the steps. Back in the day, it was just trial and error in terms of figuring this out, but we figured out that B flat does have an extra flat in it, okay? It has an E flat. You'll notice that the positioning, when I go to E flat now, the note that we're adding, the flat that we're adding is an A flat. We've already seen the B flat before. We've also already seen the E flat before. The new one's A flat. Every single time, the flat that we're adding is the 4th letter of the scale. So if you're really, really wondering about, okay, specifically, like let's say that I'm in A flat major and I'm trying to figure out what note exactly is going to be the new flat, just go from A and go up 4 letters. A, B, C, D. It's going to be D flat. So then again, we have to make sure that we include all of the flats up until D. So B, E, A, and D. So A flat major would have B flat, E flat, A flat, and D flat, like that. Now the challenge for you will be, of course, completing the rest of this. Make sure that you're utilizing your order of the sharps and order of the flats. If you have any questions, of course, leave them in the comments. This worksheet, again, is going to be in the description of the video. But hopefully this has been a helpful start to figuring out how to draw key signatures.